South Africa, a nation bracing itself with the ailing health of its greatest father, Nelson Mandela. The former head of state was admitted to a hospital in Pretoria more than a month ago, suffering from a recurrent lung infection. With daily news updates on his condition grabbing the attention and concern of people around the world, and none more so than in his beloved country. Hundreds of well-wishers have been laying flowers outside the hospital, as Mandela is a significant part of their history and embodies their struggle. A man undoubtedly much loved by his people, and for that love and support by the South African people at a difficult time for his family. His wife Graça Michelle recently said, "Mandela had given us yet another gift, for all of us to be united. That unity which he fought for will go down in history as one of his greatest legacies." On his African tour a few weeks ago, U.S. President Barack Obama paid a visit to where Mandela was imprisoned for many years. He called it a humbling experience. I also went on the same journey that Obama made to see for myself the footprints of Mandela's legacy.
Robben Island is one of the most famous prisons around the world, and not just in South Africa. Madiba was one of its most famous prisoners, also known as Nelson Mandela, South Africa's first black president. He was incarcerated here for 18 years, and Voxafrica got an exclusive tour inside the prison.
Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela,
Nelson Mandela, a man that is recognizable around the world and needs no introduction. Growing up, I remember as a child watching on TV as this great Mandela, who was revered by so many, not just in his country, but also around the world, had just been released from prison. Images of Nelson and Winnie Mandela walking on the streets after his release were beamed live all over the world. And I was one of the many people who, as a little girl, watched those powerful images glued to my screen. A moment that stood still for many freedom fighters around the world. But this was not just any freedom fighter that was being released. This was Mandela. Upon his release, he preached for freedom in South Africa.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
I was experiencing a moment of history being made, and that history was the 11th of February 1990. South Africans had called for his release for so many years, and Nelson Mandela was finally coming back home to Soweto. Mandela was incarcerated for 27 years in prison and spent 18 years on Robben Island. I always wondered if I would ever make it to the infamous Robben Island. I never knew that that day would come sooner than I had expected. Robben Island, which is Dutch for Seal Island, is an island situated in Table Bay, 6.9 kilometers west of Cape Town, South Africa. Getting to Robben Island is a short 45 minutes boat ride from Cape Town. Its blue waters and beautiful shores can be forgiven for masking the dark past that it once had. The island gained notoriety in the late 1960s as home to political prisoners, most notably Nobel Peace Prize winner Nelson Mandela. It was a high-security prison from 1961 until 1991. As the boat trudges along the blue waves edging closer and closer to the island, I couldn't help but wonder what Mandela would have been thinking when he was sentenced and making his way to what would be his new home for many, many years to come. I'd never seen a prison before, let alone one that had such a history and was notorious for its famous inmates. I wasn't sure what to expect or how I'd be feeling, but what I knew was I had mixed emotions of anxiety and excitement all conjured up into one. The moment had finally arrived, and our boat docked on Robben Island. Upon arrival, we are met with our tour guide who beckons us over to our bus tour, and with that, we are ready to explore Robben Island. The words at the gates read, "We serve with pride." Those 4 words stay with me throughout my journey, as thoughts of what it was like to live there run through my mind. Our first stop takes us to the residence of Robert Sobukwe, a South African political dissident who founded the Pan-Africanist Congress in opposition to the apartheid regime. Sobukwe was kept separately in isolation from the other prisoners on the island during his stay. In these rooms was where he lived and where his family could occasionally come and visit. These are the beds that his children would sleep in when they were granted time to come and stay over. On the walls are some of the love letters that he wrote to his wife while here. His freedom would only come in death, when he died of lung cancer in 1977.
Homeless, we are homeless. The moonlight sleeping on the midnight.
Some of the political prisoners that were also here were Govan Mbeki, and another well-known prisoner who would one day also become president of South Africa. That man is South Africa's incumbent president, Jacob Zuma. Due to his affiliation with the ANC, the African National Congress, Mandela was arrested and found guilty of sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Mandela was transferred to Robben Island, and upon his arrival, he was given prison number 46664. It stood for the 466th prisoner to have arrived at the prison in 1964. It would remain his home for the next 18 years. Our next stop was a limestone quarry where he worked many long and grueling hours. Most of the prisoners who worked here ended up developing partial eye disorders or blindness. Nelson Mandela's own vision was also partially damaged due to his eyes being exposed hours on end to the sunlight here. Right here in the cave was where he and other inmates would huddle together to hold meetings. Some could argue that these meetings were the beginnings of what would come to be known as South Africa's modern-day parliament. Also, as education was not granted to everyone, that cave also provided a space for those that were educated to teach those that needed an education.
Remember, ladies and gentlemen, education on Robben Island was not a right. It was a privilege, awarded the right to withdraw your studies, even if you were going to write some exams tomorrow. That's why the political prisoners adopted a slogan, each one teach one.
After taking a tour of some of the landmarks on the island, we were met and escorted by a former political prisoner, Dumisani Mwandla, who remains our guide for the duration of our visit. He was a prisoner here from 1986 until 1991. During his 5 years in the prison, he spent 3 years in the kitchen as a chef. At the time of his arrest, he was a member of the military wing of the ANC. Due to this active involvement in the African National Congress, Dumisani was found guilty of terrorism, sabotage, possession of arms and ammunition, trying to overthrow the government by force, leaving the country and entering illegally. He recalls a moment when he was found guilty.
Honestly speaking, when you first joined the struggle against apartheid, you knew that you were between two things. It's either you are going to be killed or you are going to prison for a very long time. And being sentenced to prison, it was like you are on leave. At least that spirit was there. As the prisoners of hope, we knew that one day we'll achieve our freedom. Whether, in fact, we were saying as youth, liberation during our lifetime, and it's what happened.
Coming up after the break, we have an exclusive tour of the prisoners' wards, and we finally get to see Mandela's cell.